Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, which is critiquing of the Constitution of the Union of African States, part 2. Apparently, last week we did part 1, and today's date is the 4th of November 2022. So last week we did part 1, and we did in various languages, the Ghanaian languages, the Ga, the Chi, the Ewe, before the English version. So this part 2, which is a continuation. The first part was on finance, and today is on education. All right, just as a recap, what did Dr. Nkrumah, who actually drafted the Constitution of the Union of African States in 1964? That's in 1964. The part 1, the recap, says that what did he say about the finance? He says, look, one, as a recap, he said, look, one, we'd have to, he made an emphatic statement, which he says, liquidating the dependence of African economies on foreign. Yeah, he made an emphatic statement, and it states, and I quote, liquidating the dependence of African economies on foreign powers and prevent their dominance by foreign economic interest. And that is an emphatic statement. You cannot. So it means that those banks that are foreign in Africa, the Barclays, the Standcharts, HSBCs and co, we have to liquidate them, because in any case, all our cash goes, when they make the profit, they repatriate all out of Africa, and they are making huge billions and even evading taxes. See, look at it carefully. He went on to say, just as a recap, he went on to say, we as African states should establish the African Common Market. That is in 64. It's only as recent as 2016, 2017, 2018 that the African Common Trade Zone or African Common Trade Agreement came into being. And even that, it has not got the common tariff which he proposed in Article 4. He says that what? Establish a union central bank, a uniform fiscal and budgetary system. A uniform fiscal. Even that we've not gotten there. We should have done the common tax regime for the whole of Africa. Then we get onto a common market, then consolidate it with that of the Union Central Bank, and encapsulate the whole thing with a common currency. He went on to say, look, and adapt other measures aimed at stabilizing the currency. He didn't say the currency, he says the currency. That's a quote. Okay, so then it means that there must be a common currency for Africa. In 1964, African leaders have been sitting all this while, and Euro has come into being. By 1998, Euro just came. And Euro has become a strong currency. And we, the originators of the idea, an African, Dr. Nkrumah, originates the idea, and Houphouët-Boigny and the Francophone countries at the time kicked against the draft, and they never accepted it. And that shows how authoritative, how powerful some of these foreign forces have a grip on African countries, especially the Francophone ones. But that's not for the discussions for today. Let's look at the other bit. He also recommended that we should set up a development fund to bridge the gap between the less developed or the developing or the poor nations as against the advancing economies and advancing developed economies like Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa and co. That you bridge that gap. Once we bridge that gap, that inequality gap, there's not going to be too much of a problem when there's a common tariff regime and a common market. Prices would have marginal price differences. Prices of goods and services will have marginal cross-border differences, and that is one issue that we should take into consideration. All right, then now we've talked about education, which is the substantive matter today. He goes on to say Article 5, the UAS, which I say is the Federation of African States, shall create conditions to promote, under the guidance of the state, universal education at all levels among the population, and shall gradually introduce free and compulsory education. Take note of these words carefully. He says, look, the state universal education. So every state, every member state must have a universal free education, free and compulsory at all levels, from primary to basic, or basic to primary, secondary, and then the tertiary. And even the post-tertiary should be free for Africans. Let me ask you, perchance, do you know how many African countries have a free secondary education as of today, 2022? Let me tell you what. We have Uganda, as few as Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Morocco, Ghana, and South Africa. Just 6 of all these African numerous 40+ plus African countries, only 6 have free secondary education. And that is how bad our situation as Africans is becoming. Let's go on to find out how many free university education do we have in Africa. As few as only 3 countries have it: Morocco, Egypt, and Kenya. That's all. All other African countries, you pay. You pay for that tuition fee. You pay to feed yourself. And that means that a lot of our people cannot have access to university education, which is not appropriate, which is counterproductive, because the human resource is our major resource. He goes on to say, look, Article 5, Nkrumah goes on to say in his draft Constitution of Union of African States that Article 5 says what? Encourage by every means the development of national culture and support and develop further the traditions of African people, which are relevant to the needs of modern times. We have to develop what is ours, because in our tradition is our wisdom, and that wisdom is our philosophy. If you get into the university, most students who read philosophy are reading about Montesquieu and Jean-Paul Sartre, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and other philosophers. Those are European philosophers. Ask me, who is studying the African philosophy? Nobody. There's no subject as African philosophy. But that should be what we should be doing, because that is what our wisdom is. That is our direction. That is who we are. And we have to understand who we are. Until then, when we borrow somebody's idea and that makes us, we are a misfit. We are a misfit. We are an alien in our own body. Alien in our own bodies. That's Africans. Look, let's go on to, he goes on to talk about encourage in every way the development of scientific research, including peaceful use of atomic energy. That even strikes me more. If at the time Nkrumah was thinking of peaceful use of atomic energy, today, 2022, we are talking of crude oil. And can you imagine that Morocco and Nigeria are signing a pact to Germany to supply them with natural gas, when a lot of African countries don't have natural gas and they need gas to cook and for fuel? Why can't we stop this contract? They have signed an agreement already. Why can Nigeria and Morocco, who are African countries, pipe the whole of Africa with gas? Every home should be piped, just like the way the tap flows. Gas must flow through all kitchens that way. Nigeria and Morocco, what are you doing? Are you thinking of Africa? Are you thinking as Africans? Or are you thinking of Africa? Or are you thinking as Africans but to serve Europeans whilst you are hungry? That should stop. Let's go on to look at the last bit. He says what? Ensure free development of the indigenous languages of the people of the member states. See, that is also another strong point. He goes on to say, look, without which it is impossible to develop African culture. You cannot have a culture without a language. That is it. So we have to develop all our language. Spanish is a language for the Spaniards. English is a language for the English people. French is a language for the French people. Chinese is a Mandarin, and others are for them. What about Africa? Have we got books written in Hausa? Have we got books written in Bantu or Swahili? We don't. So you cannot do medicine and read medicine in Swahili language. You cannot even do any engineering or any sciences or literature written in Swahili or Hausa or Bantu or any other African languages. Is that what we are? We are lost. Africa is lost. We have the body, but we have the inner is foreign. We are consuming something that's foreign, that is changing the internal body chemistry, but it cannot change it fully. So we are lost. An adulterated body we are as Africans. Look, let's take Nkrumah serious and then relook at some of these things. Let me just recap about it. This Nkrumah, in his draft constitution, which was foiled as led by Houphouët-Boigny of Liberia, Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast and the Francophone countries, that draft never came into being in 1964. This is 2022. The existing African country presidents or leaders should take some of these Nkrumah's ideas seriously. I am not an Nkrumahist, but I look out for what I think is right. In my view, I think is appropriate for Africa, and that's what I'm projecting. The name is H. Kwame Afaglo. Thank you.